Welcome to the latest edition of Anyone, Anywhere, Anytime with me, Marshan Kenny. Well, if you notice a little more pep in my step, it's because it's game week. That's right. This Saturday at the Rock, our Southern Miss Golden Eagles are going to take on the Alcorn State Braves in game one of the football season. So I'm really fired up to see everybody once again. And we're predicting big things in year three of the Will Hall era. And I get into some of those predictions in our next segment that we call Four and Out. So this week on social media, I asked the Southern Miss Nation, what are your predictions for this football season? I had a lot of great answers, but I can only get to four of them because that's the name of the segment, Four and Out. First up from Twitter, Rob's Ranking said 9-3 with a bowl victory, which gives us 10 wins. I like that prediction right there. Next up, Tim Finnegan said 9-3 and getting to the conference title game. Basketball won the conference. Baseball won the conference. It's football's turn. Next up from Twitter, fan number 9, baseball. Realistically, 7-5 is probably where we will be with this very tough schedule. I'm hoping I'm wrong and it's 8-4 or better. And finally, Avery Nobles with a bold prediction. He said 11-3 with an exclamation point. I like that prediction right there. Thanks for all the fan comments, and please keep them coming into the show. Well, today's interview is going to be absolutely awesome. It comes with the longtime voice of the Golden Eagles. That's right. It's the one and only John Cox. Well, today's interview is with a guy who's been the voice of Southern Miss athletics for over 40 years. He's a 6-time Mississippi Sportscaster of the Year. He's in the Southern Miss Hall of Fame. So with all that said, today's guest is the one and only, the legend, my friend, John Cox. And John, how are you today, man?
I'm doing good. I was just looking a minute ago. Off to my left, I've got that picture, that back-to-back picture. And I say you making a tackle there against Pittsburgh back in 1997 in that painting back there. So I've been looking at you all morning up there.
Oh, I appreciate that, John. That painting means the world to me. You called all those games, and it was such an honor to talk to you after games. And I know it did a great deal when John Cox said you did a great job. That's all the things I needed. So, but thank you, John. That artwork is all over Hattiesburg. Man, you've been a part of Southern Miss for so long. You've done so much. What does Southern Miss mean to you?
Well, everything. Yeah, I always tell people it made my dreams come true. You know, as a little guy growing up in Middletown, Ohio, all I ever wanted to do was be a sportscaster. I grew up sitting on the back porch there in Middletown, Ohio. Me and my dad would listen to ball games all the time. He was a big St. Louis Cardinal fan, so we would listen to Harry Carey and Jack Buck do the Cardinal games, and in addition to high school games and a lot of things. But all I ever wanted to do was I thought that's got to be the greatest job there could ever be, was to be able to sit there in front of a microphone and broadcast ball games, whether it be football, basketball, or baseball. And so everything I did from that point on, really, in hindsight, was to make myself ready to be able to do that one day. In fact, the reason I came to Southern Miss was really for that opportunity. I didn't know much about Southern Miss growing up in Ohio, but I came down here almost sight unseen, and we're lucky enough to run into 3 gentlemen who changed my whole life around. One was Bill Goodrich. Bill, at the time, was the voice of the Golden Eagles. And for whatever reason, he kind of, put his arm around me and gave me opportunity to be on the air with them. First, maybe just doing the statistics or the scoring or things like that of a basketball game, and maybe spotting a little for him in football. Then Ace Cleveland, who was Rick Cleveland's dad, the longtime sports information director, who gave me a chance to get in that business as well. And then Bud Kirkpatrick, who was a public relations director for a long, long time at Southern Miss, who really created some broadcasting opportunities for me that never had been done before at Southern Miss. Women's basketball, baseball. We started doing some baseball. And so again, without very, very little experience, all of a sudden I'd slap that headset on and, started doing ball games and, tried to think back to all those great guys I'd listened to before. So I love Southern Miss. It made my dreams come true. It's allowed me to do what I've always wanted to do, like I said, since I was 5 or 6 years old. And, so not much my life hadn't been been blessed by being a part of Southern Miss.
Oh, what great stories right there, and some of those great names that a lot of people know in Southern Miss lore. So good stuff right there. And John, knowing a little bit about you, man, you love the game of basketball. And in the 70s, when you're an undergraduate, you played a little hoops for Southern Miss, man. Talk about that.
Well, very little. Very little. I was lucky enough. I wanted to play basketball. One of the reasons I came down here, one of the things I saw laying on my bed in Middletown, Ohio, when I was a senior in high school, was reading a Street and Smith's college basketball yearbook. And Southern Miss, the year before, had gone 0-24. They had not won a basketball game. And they had a comment in there from the coach, who was Jeep Clark at the time, saying, we're going to be quicker next year, even if it means sacrificing height. And I said, man, I'm 5'8". Maybe that's the place to go. So out of the blue, I wrote a letter, and it was answered by a guy I got to know very well, Mickey Harrington. Mickey Harrington was Doc Harrington's brother, who was a great baseball player and basketball player. And he wrote me back and said, we can't promise anything, but if you'd like to come down and give it a try, come on. That's all I had to hear. So, when it came time, I enrolled in school, packed my bag, came to Hattiesburg, and was lucky enough to play on the junior varsity basketball team. Me and Steve Knight, the head coach over at William Carey. Steve and I were the starting backcourt there for the junior varsity basketball team. That would have been 74, 75, I guess. And, but one night a guy got hurt named Gary Sims. Gary's still around here in Hattiesburg. Gary got hurt, and he had been keeping the scorebook for Bill Goodrich, who was the voice of the Golden Eagles. And so he had to go to the hospital, get stitches or whatever. Ronnie Malone, who was the junior varsity coach, said, hey, does anybody want to keep the scorebook for Bill? And knowing that's what I wanted to do one day, I raised my hand. I said, I'll do it. So I started doing that for Bill. Gary Sims never got that job back. Bill would eventually let me come on the air and, read off the stats and the scoring and things like that. So, once again, Southern Miss gave me a chance to do something I always wanted to do. And so I never forget that, the opportunity to be there and sit with Bill Goodrich and, listen to him do ball games. And eventually he had some medical issues and got sick. And a couple of years later, I got to do some ball games because he was sick and couldn't do the games. And so now all of a sudden I'm on the air. I was doing women's basketball, but now all of a sudden I'm on the air doing men's basketball. So right place at the right time. Southern Miss has always been great to me.
Oh, that's awesome. Incredible stories, background right there, John. And you were a part of Southern Miss sports in the 80s, during that 80s Eagle fever. I mean, you called games with guys like Reggie Collier, Sammy Winder, Rhett Favre. Man, talk about 80s Eagle fever and what was going on in Hattiesburg.
Well, it's really good. The first thing in the 80s that really kind of occurred was Southern Miss went to a bowl game for the first time as a Division I school. They'd been to some bowl games previous when there were two divisions. There was University Division and College Division, and Southern Miss was College Division there, late 50s, early 60s, and of course won a national championship, the UPI College Division National Championship. But 1980 was the first true bowl game as a Division I school. Eagles went to Shreveport, played in the Independence Bowl against McNeese State, won that one 16-14, and that was one of those teams that Reggie Collier and all those guys, I mean, on and down the line. You could spend the rest of the day naming some of the great players on some of those teams of the early 80s. But, that really got it going there. 80 to the Independence Bowl. 81 to the Tangerine Bowl where they played Missouri. Then all of a sudden you get to 82 and you got the win over Bear Bryant, snapping Alabama's 56-game home winning streak there at what is Bryant-Denny Stadium. And then, later on, great players like Brett Favre, Brett shows up there in 1987 and, kind of the rest is history there. So just, it was unbelievable, the great players. I mean, I could sit here all day and talk about it, but that was really kind of too, and you were a part of this when you ended up playing at Southern Miss, but the 80s was really kind of the birth of the original Nasty Bunch defense, and there were so many great players on those teams, guys, and I'd almost be afraid to mention too many of them because I'd leave somebody out. But, the era of the great linebackers, but then you had defensive backs like Hanford Dixon, guys that went on and played in the NFL and played professional football. And that defense, that Nasty Bunch defense back in the 80s really, along with Reggie Collier and some of those guys, kind of put Southern Miss football on the college football map, particularly as a Division I school. They'd done that before as a university division, a small college, but now all of a sudden, in national TV, the first true national TV games were there in the 1980s. Everybody, wanted to have, Southern Miss and get a shot of Collier and Winder and Ricky Floyd and Lewis Lips and, Hanford Dixon on defense and guys like that. So it was really, it wasn't the start of things, but it really put Southern Miss on the national map where people could watch them and knew more about them than probably ever had before.
Oh, that's awesome. What a foundation talk right there, 80s Eagle Fever and what it was all about. And I know it's hard to pick one call of yours because you made so many incredible ones. But I read there's one you really do love. It was October 16th, 1989, the Miracle at Louisville, Favre to Tillman. Talk about that call if you don't mind, John.
Man. Well, it's nothing. No, you don't think about, well, you think about some of those things a little bit sometimes, but not much. But what a great game that was. That was 89, I guess, October of 89. Up at old Cardinal Stadium in Louisville. And that was an old baseball park where they played, some football. But, Southern Miss didn't look like they had any chance to win it, but they got it back. And, Brett Favre down the field to Darrell Tillman. It got tipped a couple of times, tipped and caught by Tillman. And, Darrell was able to get it in. He was a great receiver, underrated receiver for the Golden Eagles from down the road in Wiggins, Mississippi. And, got tipped in the air. He caught it, had the presence of mind to catch it, turn upfield, go into the end zone. And that was kind of probably the first time, although Brett Favre had started to get a lot of attention, it was probably that one play that all of a sudden put him on the national map. That was still a time where there weren't a lot of TV games that were televised. That game was not a televised game that I remember, but it was that one play that got replayed time and time again all over the country. And it sort of it helped continue to put Southern Miss on the map. It also probably brought Brett Favre to the attention because he'd made a heck of a play. He was being chased by a guy by the name of Ted Washington, who was one of the better defensive linemen in the country. And somehow he was able to use that forearm to push Washington away just long enough to throw it as far as he could down the field where it was tipped and caught by Tillman. But, that one play was probably shown back in 89 more than any other play, maybe to this day, maybe any other play the Eagles have ever been involved in. But that one certainly helped put Southern Miss on the map and get them some national attention.
Oh, absolutely. I've watched that play on YouTube where have you at least 100 times at this point, and your voice is tied to that incredible play, which is awesome. And another game right around that time, we were playing at Florida State, top 10, beat them late in the game, just trying to tie in a little history because we played Florida State this year. How was that win and calling that game in Tallahassee when Florida State was the real deal?
Yeah, that one, I thought the 89 game actually was in Jacksonville.
Forgive me, not in Tallahassee, but we got a road game.
But the one that really stands out would have been in 1981, the start of that era of the 80s. Southern Miss went down to play at Florida State, and Reggie Kyer was the quarterback. And that game was an amazing win for the Golden Eagles. And nobody thought Southern Miss was going to be able to win, that one. So they had some big wins, but that one with Brett was a good one too. That was in Jacksonville, 89 in Jacksonville. Florida State, I think they had bought the game. They didn't want to come to play in Hattiesburg. I think they paid us to come to Jacksonville and play. And nobody giving the Eagles much chance. But that was a nationally televised game. I think it was WTBS, the old super station there in Atlanta, that was covering that ball game. And the Eagles won that one. And man, that was one that really helped get the Eagles on the map.
Oh, heck yeah. And great talk with both those Florida State games, because the people out there in the Seminole country definitely know about the Golden Eagles if you know the past and what we can do. So, but John, right around that time in the 80s, early 90s, we were in the Metro Conference, independent as football. And there was talk of that Metro Conference becoming a super conference, the first of its kind. If that would have happened, John, how would the landscape of Southern Miss been changed to this day?
Well, would have been quite a bit, but I don't know that there was ever the old Metro Conference. I don't know there ever was a plan. The sad part was, I don't know if there ever was a plan to play football. It was created as a basketball league, and even though some of the teams in that old Metro had great football programs, I don't think there was ever a plan for it to be that way. They tried to make it that way, but right about that time, as we got into the 90s, there is when it started to kind of splinter a little bit. And the Florida States and the South Carolinas and people like that, Virginia Techs and schools like that, were looking for a league that was that played football. But for Southern Miss, having never been in a league other than back in the late 40s and early 50s, to be a part of that Metro Conference, particularly even though it wasn't geared towards playing football, it helped put Southern Miss basketball on the map. It helped put Southern Miss baseball on the map, and in a roundabout way, it helped to continue that national attention that Southern Miss was getting as far as football was concerned. And it gave us an opportunity to play some really good teams. But yeah, I'm like you. If they had finally decided to make that step and take those Metro Conference teams and make that a football league, you think about that. You had Florida State, you had South Carolina, you had Virginia Tech, you had Cincinnati, you had Memphis in there, you had Southern Miss was in there, Tulane was in there. I mean, that back in the day, that's some pretty good names in regards to football as well. So yeah, that's probably somebody sitting back that had to make those decisions, man, saying, man, we should have done that. But it would have helped Southern Miss tremendously. It still helps Southern Miss. The Metro, through baseball and basketball and some of the other stuff, helped put Southern Miss even more on that map. But yeah, that's probably the one thing you wish could have happened, that the Metro could have become a football league.
Oh, and during that time, you stressed the basketball importance of the Metro back when Reed Green Coliseum was rocking. I mean, the 87 NIT championship team. How was it calling games at Reed Green back then?
Well, a lot like last year. It was the closest I think we've been to that. Last year was the closest we've been to that in a long time. Back then, that was the beauty of the Metro too. There was a stretch there in the Metro, basketball-wise, 86 to the early 90s, where 90% of the games were on TV. Old Raycom would come in and either ESPN or Raycom would have those games, and almost every conference game was on TV, which had a lot to do with helping elevate Southern Miss basketball. But of course, you had a lot of great teams winning that NIT. That was one of the great accomplishments ever by Southern Miss. And that was a team that really at the start of the year wasn't playing very well, but got hot at the right time. and they make it into that NIT. And the first game is against Ole Miss here on a Friday night, and the Eagles win that one really easily. Then they send us to play at St. Louis, old Kiel Auditorium in St. Louis, sellout crowd, St. Patrick's Day. They're selling green beer in Kiel Auditorium that night, and finally had to stop selling it at halftime. It was so wild in there. Eagles win that one in overtime on one of the strangest shots I've ever seen. John White shoots one out of the right corner that's a kind of a line drive that hits the rim, bounces literally 4 or 5 feet up into the air, and then drops down into the basket to win the game for the Eagles. Now, the Eagles think that they're going to get a home game after that. In fact, they'd sort of been promised, if you win at St. Louis, we're probably going to let you have another game back at Reed Green Coliseum. But instead, they send us to Vanderbilt. And so Vanderbilt pretty well is believing they're going to win. And they're going to go to Madison Square Garden and play in the NIT. And their fans had already booked rooms at the hotels in New York City. But again, the Eagles win that one. Had a great game that day, that afternoon, Saturday afternoon. They win that one. All of a sudden, the Eagles, they're going to Madison Square Garden. Very little time. We came home for about 6 hours, got back on the bus, went to the airport, flew to Madison Square Garden. He had all those guys at small town Mississippi guys, Casey Fisher and Randolph Keys and guys like that, and guys that, had never been too far away from home. All of a sudden, there we are on the bus going, downtown New York and Madison Square Garden. And I never forget Randolph Keys, great player for the Golden Eagles, walked in the first time there for practice one day. And his comment was, well, you could put a whole lot of hay in this building. So those guys loved it. Those guys loved it. And, where a lot of people thought maybe they'd be overwhelmed by all the excitement and the publicity and the crowds and things like that, it didn't faze those guys a bit. They just went out and played basketball and, won those 2 games, Nebraska and LaSalle, and win the NIT. That's one of the great. That is one of the most exciting and great moments in Golden Eagle athletics, no doubt about it.
Oh, fantastic story right there, John. And one of the guys on that team was Jay Ladner, our current Southern Miss men's basketball coach. And you hit on something. This past season, it was special. And that night in Reed Green Coliseum this past season, we're playing the Raging Cajuns. It's a packed house. Can we pack it out again? And we did. What'd that night mean to you?
Well, Jay and I talked quite a bit as we traveled around the country about when he was playing and some of those teams. And particularly, as we saw earlier in that week, that pretty good chance that was going to be a sellout. We both sort of went back and reflected on some of those great times at Reed Green Coliseum and what was going to be like to be back in that type of atmosphere. But Jay should get a lot of credit. Jay Ladner, from the day he took over at Southern Miss, really didn't change his plan to kind of get Southern Miss basketball back to where we all wanted it to be. And he stuck to that plan. There wasn't he didn't go in any different directions. He just knew what he wanted to do. And, it was kind of the Coach Turk's plan back in the day is, draw that circle a couple hundred miles around Hattiesburg and go find the best players. And, Jay sort of did that. Now, of course, we brought in some guys. The portal sort of changed that around a lot. You could bring in some different guys. But that's what I thought about that night as I sat there. And, of course, I like to get there early. I was there about 2 o'clock that afternoon and kind of watched the crowd come in little by little. And that's where my mind sort of went back. And Jay, the thing that Jay and I both said as we met to do his pregame show was, wouldn't Coach Turk be excited to see this happening again at Reed Green Coliseum? And so it's a great night. And fortunately, a Golden Eagle win. But Jay's done a great job. And again, doing it kind of the Southern Miss way. And it's been a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of fun this year.
Oh, heck yeah. I mean, Jay Ladner bleeds black and gold just like you do, John. So it was so much fun to see him turn things around this past season. Hey, John, you've been doing this for a while, been doing an incredible job, 6-time Sportscaster of the Year in Mississippi. What are some of the keys for being a great play-by-play guy?
Well, I look back on the guys that I listened to growing up. I was as I said, my dad and I used to listen to Harry, Carey, and Jack Buck do the Cardinal games on a little white Zenith transistor radio sitting on the back porch. But I was lucky to grow up in an area where there were so many great announcers. There was Al Michaels was doing the Cincinnati Reds at the time, alongside a guy by the name of Joe Nuxall. There was guys. My dad was a Kentucky fan. My sister went to Kentucky. My dad went to Kentucky. Kaywood Ledford was a great announcer for the Kentucky Wildcats. We'd listen to him all the time, and on and on. And I grew up in a city, Middletown, Ohio, where there was a guy named Warren Johnson who did all the Middletown High games, but he did Miami of Ohio. He did everything. So I grew up listening to me, some of the best guys that you could ever have listened to. And the one thing I think that they had all in common that I try to go with along when I'm doing games today is to, just don't get too carried away with stuff that's not important. And people want to know who's got the ball and where they got the ball and how they got the ball and, what the score is and things like that. And, those guys that I talked about and I listened to were great at telling you stuff about the guys that were involved in the game and why they were involved and how they got involved and all those types of things. So, to me, the secret has always been, and I learned it from those guys, is, make sure people know who's got it and where they got it and how they got it, and throw in a few stats here and there. And so, it's like telling a story. It's like writing a story or reading a book. You just got to write the book as it goes along. So, but I was lucky. I was really, really lucky to be surrounded throughout my life, including when I got here with Bill Goodrich, to be around guys and listen to guys and meet guys that were great storytellers who did it the right way. And if you do it the right way and you tell that story the right way, then you can't ever go wrong.
Oh, John, a great thing right there. And you tell great stories. And last season, Lee Roberts, who's been doing color with you for about 8 years now, and you two guys do an incredible job calling Southern Miss football games, I got to fill in for him. And I got to do color with you, and I've respected and admired you for so long now, John. But I had never seen it in person, the amount of work that you put into this broadcast and Southern Miss football games. And until you see it, people watching this, you can't give John Cox enough respect and admiration. He gets there early, he leaves the late.
Correct you. I've never worked a day in my life.
That's awesome.
I'm doing what I wanted to do since I was about 6 years old. So I've never looked at it as work, but there is a lot of preparation that goes into it, and one of the reasons, and I do a lot, so does Lee Roberts, so you do, but the thing that I really love more now than I ever did was I like to be there early. Football, if we're playing a 5 or 6 o'clock game, I'm usually there about 8 or 9 in the morning. I like to sit in that booth and study and get ready for a game, but also watch the day unfold there in the stadium. Here's the managers are in there setting stuff up. Here comes the physical plant. They're doing stuff. I just like to be there and watch it all kind of unfold. Same with basketball. Love to be in that basketball. And there might be 2 guys in there on our team in there shooting early in the afternoon. But you get a chance to talk to those guys. You get a chance to know those guys. And so is there preparation? Yeah. Is it work? No way, man. It's like stealing almost, man. You get paid to come to ball games and sit there and describe what happens at a ball game. And that's I can't think of anything that's any better than that.
Oh, John, that's an awesome way to put it. Thanks for cutting me off. Because for me to say it's a job, it's your passion, man. That's what it is. It's your love in your life. So but it was an awesome honor of mine to watch what you do on game day. And John, this might be an unfair question, but the big three sports: football, basketball, and baseball. Do you maybe have a favorite one that you like to call a little bit better?
Maybe the most asked question I ever get. What's your favorite? And to me,
hard to go with the norm, John.
my favorite's the one whichever's going on that particular day. It's like trying to say which of your children is your favorite. And I like them all for different reasons. I like football because of the enormity of football. You're in a big stadium. There's a lot of people there. There's a lot of players out on the field. It's just everything that is a part of a college football game makes that kind of unique. Basketball, I like the intimacy of basketball. You travel with the team, so I'm on buses with those guys all the time, at the hotels, at shoot-arounds, at practices, and but you're right there. I mean, the ball can bounce over there, and you catch the ball. You get a chance to get to know the referees, and you get to know them, and they'll come tell you stuff. And so just the intimate nature of basketball and the speed of the game, it's the quickest of all of them. And so it's going nonstop all the time. I love the speed of the game, particularly, back in the days when Coach Turk was here, and, Eagles would score 100 points easy all the time, and Jay's kind of brought that style of play back. So that of basketball. And then baseball, I like the fact that baseball is like you are sitting in your living room and just describing what's going on to the guy next door. It's a storytelling. They're all storytelling games, but baseball per se is a game that's made for stories. And that's what I learned growing up listening to guys like Kerry Carey and Jack Buck and Joe Nuxall and Marty Brenneman and all those guys I used to listen to. Warren Johnson was you had to learn how to tell stories. There's so much slow time in a baseball game. You want to be able to tell people more about those players and about the history of the game and the last time this happened and things like that. So they're all my favorite. All for different reasons, but again, just to be able to slap that headset on as many times a year as I get to, man, there's nothing better.
Oh, that's awesome, John, right there. And you've dealt with a lot of colorful Southern Miss head coaches through the years. Do you have any maybe memorable moments, memorable interviews that occurred with a certain head coach here or there?
Not really. What you got to learn the most there, the hardest thing to learn is sometimes particularly after the game. Before the game, it's always pretty easy. The sun is always shining before the ball game. So most of them, unless the team's in the midst of a stretch where they haven't played very well, coaches are pretty good. I'll sit down, with them, and I do them all differently. I do Will and I do it on a Thursday. Right now, we do his pregame radio show. Basketball, Coach Ladner and I always do it during the shoot-around that morning or that afternoon. And then baseball, Coach Barry and I had a routine where we would do it right after batting practice in his office. So the key is you just got to, you got to find a way. They're not always in the best of mood, depending on how the team is going, but you got to find a way to make them talk about what's going to happen in that particular ball game. And I'm lucky because I've been around them all and have known most of them, for a long, heck, I've known Jay Ladner since he's about 10 years old, so you know them. And I think they know me, that I'm looking for more for information. I'm not looking to ask them a question, particularly in the pregame show, that's going to try to trip them up or make them talk about something that they really don't want to talk to. In fact, I've discovered the less you talk about something that you might want to ask them about, they eventually end up talking about it anyway. So, you have to have that relationship with that coach and with those players. And you'll find that more times than not, they'll give you some stuff that'll be interesting that they might not give anybody else that's coming in to talk to them.
Oh, good stuff right there, John. And talking about our proud football program one more time. Getting into the 2012 season before the start, we were on a string of 18 straight winning seasons. John, then 2012 happened where we went 0-12, biggest turnaround in college football history as far as win-losses from season to season. John, I got to ask you, that 12 season, as it was going along, how was that vibe, calling those games and just keeping spirits up, man, especially as that season went along?
Well, again, your job as a play-by-play announcer is to describe what's going on. And once the game starts, obviously, you've got to describe what's going on. I have a different way maybe of doing it. I always like to look for the positives. And granted, that was a tough season, a lot of injuries, a lot of tough losses early in the year. But, your job is to describe what's going on. I don't know that your job necessarily is to have to tell the fans what they should be thinking about. I think you go out and describe the action. You describe what's going on. You don't sugarcoat anything. If it's not going good, you talk about it's not going good. If it's going good, you talk about it being good. So I don't know that it's the play-by-play announcer's job to editorialize during the course of a broadcast. And so I think you just get the facts out there, describe what's going on, and the fans can come up with their own, what they think's going on or what they think it's going to be. I just think you go out and describe the action, good or bad. You go out and tell them what's going on.
Oh, good stuff right there. That season was unique, that's for sure. But you stayed the course, John, and kept everything going just as the norm. But on the football players, I mean, you've dealt with so many through the years, so many big names historically. Are there some certain player interviews, player interactions that really stick out to you as maybe a memorable moment?
Well, I mean, you can probably, I mean, you were always a great interview, your personality, when you're messing around with a football team, when you've got 100 guys or, 60 or 70 that are playing on a regular basis, there's always going to be guys like you who, you don't have to ask many questions. You just put the microphone out in front of them and they start talking. Brett Favre was kind of like that. Reggie Kyer was kind of like that, And but it's a challenge sometimes. If you're going to present the entire picture, sometimes you've got to interview some guys that maybe don't want to have to do it, or maybe aren't quite as good at talking or answering questions as other guys are. So you just gotta find a way to what the answer is there, what the key is to make those guys talk about it. And normally it's talking about themselves or talking about their families or talking about their teammates. They don't like to talk about themselves. But there's always guys. I mean, baseball, Brian Dozier was always great. He'd always give you a lot of good stuff before and after the game. And there's a lot of characters on a baseball team. You spend more time with baseball than you do everybody. I mean, you're on the road with baseball all the time. Brett Favre, you never knew what Brett was going to come out and say during a post game or even a pre-game interview. And the coaches, I got along with all the coaches. So, the key is you just got to find out what makes that person interested. Let them know that you're on their side. You're just trying to let the folks see a side of them that maybe they've not seen before. So just got to be patient, find a way to kind of get inside of what they want to talk about. And before long, they'll start giving you a lot of great stuff that maybe you wouldn't have gotten if you had done it a different way.
Oh, heck yeah. And you hit on baseball right there, too. I mean, we've had some tremendous coaches through the years. Hill Denton, Corky Palmer, Scott Berry. I mean, and now Coach Oz, I think is going to be a great one.
I've known them all. I did games, a few games on the campus radio station when Coach Taylor was here, and I knew him all his life, at least my life here at Southern Miss, and and I knew Hill Denson. I've known Corky and Scott Berry, and now Oz. So going back, and even knew a Reed Green, who at one time was a coach of the baseball team. So I've known literally all the coaches going back all the way to about World War II.
Oh, that's awesome right there. Just some tremendous personalities too. Talking conference real quick, the Sun Belt. How much is it of an impact do you see that has made on Southern Miss athletics and its direction for the future?
One of the biggest and best things and most important things we've ever done. It has helped take Southern Miss to another level. There's the conference is so good as far, well, the competition's been good. The competition's really, really good. The teams are really good. A lot of similarities between all the teams within the Sun Belt Conference, but great leadership. Keith Gill, the commissioner of the Sun Belt, is really good and knows what direction to take the league. And I think all the teams have gotten better already just by being a part of it. So we'll see what the future holds. But to me, the minute it took place, I think it became one of the biggest things we've ever done at Southern Miss, and it's garnered us a lot, probably a lot more national attention than we've had in a long, long time. Great competition from top to bottom. So, yep, I don't think any question. Maybe the best move we've ever made here at Southern Miss.
Yeah, real rivalries being built too, which I absolutely love. And who do you see as the biggest rival in the Sun Belt and kind of the big three sports right now?
I'm not sure that we know that yet. I don't know until you get into it. You know, we played a lot of them, before, either as mostly as I guess non-conference teams. But once you get into a league, it's a little bit different when you're seeing them in every sport and you're seeing them more regularly than you probably had before. So I think that's a question yet to be answered. Who's going to develop as our great rival in the league? Oh, there's a lot of them. There's some great teams. This is going to be a lot of fun, and I love it. I enjoy it. I've known a lot of the guys, my counterparts, for a long time in the league, but have gotten to meet some new guys, for the first time. So a lot of positives about the Sun Belt Conference.
Oh, heck yeah. And then it's getting recognized in football in many arenas as the best G5 program or conference in America. So let's get into this 2023 football season, John. I mean, year 3 of Coach Hall is doing a fantastic job. What are you most excited about this season?
When it starts. As
simple as that.
That's, I'm not a big fan of the downtime between the end of baseball and the start of football. So I'm ready for football to get started. I'm excited about Will Hall and what he and his staff have done and the way they've done it. No quick fixes, do it the right way, do it the Southern Miss way, find those guys, draw that circle a couple of 100 miles around Hattiesburg and go find the best players that you can find, guys that have grown up kind of watching Southern Miss and in some cases were fans of Southern Miss. And so I think everything about it is in a positive way. The conference has been great for it. Will Hall has been great for it. He's put together an amazing assistant coaching staff. The players are all, to me, one of the best compliments you can get if you're a player is that's a Southern Miss player. You were a Southern Miss player. A lot of guys you played with were Southern Miss players, and we got a lot of those Southern Miss players on this football team. So going to be exciting. I think they've gotten better and better, as I said, since Will's been here. So it's going to be an exciting season, and I'm anxious for that first game.
Okay, talking about this 2023 football schedule, it's pretty nice, John. Kind of reminds you of those days of anyone, anywhere, anytime. What are your thoughts on the schedule?
Yeah, it does have the feel of one of those old-time Southern Miss schedules, the way it's kind of made up. But, I'm excited about it. It's going to be a great, exciting schedule for our players, a great test for our Golden Eagle football team. The Sun Belt Conference schedule is really neat. That what I like about the schedule, again, there's a lot of opportunities for our fans who, of course, here at the Rock, but also not too far away on the road to go watch the Golden Eagles. So I think they've done a good job of putting it together, and it'll be another challenging schedule, but that's what the Eagles like. And so it'll be a lot of fun to play that schedule this year.
Yeah, that's how we do things around here. Big wins on the road, John. That's how we made the big name. And real quick, John, you got an absolutely beautiful family life. Any updates on the family side of things?
My two girls, my two daughters, man, they love Southern Miss, and they love Southern Miss football. They get to games as much as they can. Particularly my youngest one, Aaron. Aaron loves sitting in the radio booth and helping us out and doing things, whether it be football or basketball or baseball. So everybody's doing good. Everybody's excited about the start of another football season.
Oh, heck yeah, it's about that time, John. And real quick from you, what's maybe a message for the current state of Southern Miss athletics in the future for the Southern Miss fans from the great John Cox?
Well, the future's bright, and it starts at the top of the university. It starts with Joe Paul. Dr. Joe Paul has done a great job of taking over here at Southern Miss, and not only in athletics, but all over campus, doing a lot of amazing things. But down to Jeremy McLean, the director of athletics, who is the perfect guy to be here at Southern Miss, has done an amazing job of helping us continue to move up the ladder in college athletics, and the great staff that we work with here at Southern Miss. We got a lot of great people here at Southern Miss who have been here for a long time. They love Southern Miss. They love Southern Miss athletics. So I can't think of a better time to be a part of Southern Miss. The future's bright. It's going to be a great year this year, and the future's bright for Golden Eagle athletics and the University of Southern Mississippi.
Great message, John. And you have no idea how many people said, when you getting John Cox on your show? Well, here you are, and it has been an absolute honor to have you on my show, John.
That's been great. I loved it when you played. I've been watching you in your career after your career at Southern Miss. You've done a great job. You bring that same excitement, that same confidence, that same ability to this kind of stuff that you did when you were on the football field. So great to be on with you. Great to have you a part of a Southern Miss family. And I'm looking back at that picture again. There, you making that. You and is that Perry Phoenix has just picked up the loose ball after you guys have knocked it away for a touchdown there in the Liberty Bowl. So that's up there all the time. Take a look at that.
Heck yeah, my favorite New Year's Eve of all time, 97 in Memphis. Appreciate that, Coach John. Appreciate all the kind words right there. And I think a great way to close this show would be for me and John Cox giving all the Southern Miss fans a big Southern Miss.
To the top.
To the top. Well, that's it for another edition of Anyone, Anywhere, Anytime. And if you're enjoying the show, I'm going to ask you to do something that's absolutely free and easy to do, and that's just subscribe to our channels on YouTube, Spotify, or if you're listening out there on Apple Podcasts, what have you. Also, please help spread the word of the show with your family and friends. Repost, retweet the show, what have you, if you're enjoying what you're seeing here. Well, I can't wait to see everybody this weekend at The Rock as we take on the Alcorn State Braves. It's going to be a great time gathering once again. Until next time, as always, it's Southern Miss to the top.